This is Joe Wong. Welcome to the Trap Set. During the age of social distancing, we're recording by phone and releasing new episodes every day. Today's guest is Billy Gibbons. A native of Houston, Billy began his recording career in 1968 with the psychedelic outfit, the Moving Sidewalks. In 1969, he co-founded one of the most inventive and adventurous bands of all time, ZZ Top. I reached him at his home in Nevada.
Hello.
Hey, Billy.
Yes.
How are you doing?
We're doing good. I'm sure we can chew up some minutes here.
Let's kill some time. I think everybody has some time to kill.
Oh, this is quite unusual in the grand scheme of things, but let's proceed onward and see if we can entertain a few folks.
The first guest that we had on this show almost 6 years ago was in a band called Fugazi. And I read once that you and Rick Rubin went to go see them at the Palladium and that they had an impact on you. Is that right?
That is correct. That was, in fact, I've still got I kept the poster knowing that this band was doing something that was diametrically different than a lot of what was going on in rock and roll, but somehow the I don't know. I think the leftovers from when I was in England, getting a dose of the punk scene, and when things started really changing toward thrashing and bashing, that particular evening with Fugazi was quite special. One of the great things about that particular point in time, the extensions of experimentation were starting to stretch out in all directions, and Rick Rubin and I sneaked up behind the band. We were able to make our way through the backstage door, and coming on the backside of the bandstand, we saw this giant bell that was situated behind the drummer, and we couldn't wait till the crowning moment when the bell was struck.
That drummer's name is Brendan Canty, and he was the first guest on this show about 6 years ago.
Yeah, Brendan Canty is standing in line with so many of the great drummers, starting back when if we really want to go back, when I was with the Moving Sidewalks playing with Jimi Hendrix, and Mitch Mitchell was doing his jazz drumming behind a rock show, on through eons, up to the present. My good friend Matt Sorum, who played with Guns N' Roses, Velvet Revolver, Chris Layton with Stevie Ray Vaughan, Joe Fazio down there operating the new HD percussion, based with offices around the world. There's so much going on, and I think that there's a bottom line to be spoken about here, and I'm thinking the word might be thrash, or there's two words, thrash and bash.
Well, I want to go back to the beginning. Your father, Freddie Gibbons, was a classically trained musician, was he not?
Correct. He started off with, he did it from top to bottom, from silent movies all the way out to Hollywood, California, working as one of the music directors at MGM Pictures, all the way back to taking the stage with orchestral movements.
How did he influence you as a child? Were you expected to be a classically trained performer as well?
Well, that's a possibility, but it took an abrupt turn when my mom took my younger sister and I to see Elvis Presley back in 1956. And, we were tykes hanging on to Mom's hand. And what I saw was rather intriguing, if not, altogether just fireworks. And that kind of set the stage. I kind of knew something was going on. And then a couple of years later, I hopped in the car with my dad, and he said, come on, we're going to go down to Bill Holford's recording studio, ACA Recording Studios down off of West Gray. He said, I want you to sit in that chair. If you need me, I'll be in the office. But he said, I think you'll enjoy this. There's a band coming in, and you're going to see records being made, which, lo and behold, became B.B. King and his orchestra.
Wow.
And that tied the knot. I saw B.B., what he was doing on the guitar, and I said, well, that's for me.
Were you playing guitar yet at that point?
I got the guitar when I turned 13 years later. Under the Christmas tree was a Gibson Melody Maker and a Fender Champ amp.
What a great amp, and what a great guitar.
Oh, yeah. And fortunately, I had the connecting cable. I immediately went to work to figure out how to play the intro to Ray Charles, What'd I Say? And the famous dun-ta-dun-ta-dun-ta from Jimmy Reed.
Did guitar make sense to you intuitively?
Yes. It was the one thing that seemed to make the most sense. You could do solo work, you could do accompanying work, and it was easy to carry.
and I heard that actually before you played guitar, you were a percussionist and you even studied with Tito Puente. Is that right?
Correct. I was banging around on all things around the house. Here comes my dad said, look, if you're going to continue this bang, 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 he said, let's make sure that you learn how to do it appropriately. And at 12 years old, next thing I know, I was on a plane up to New York City and got in a cab, traipsing up to Spanish Harlem, knocking on a door, and there was 2 timbale sticks thrust at me with this guy, Tito Puente, saying, show me what you want to play. And from there it started, and I spent the summer learning all sorts of Latin percussion instruments, conga, bongo, timbale, the maracas, claves, pescado, you name it. If it was going to make some noise, I was required to learn it.
Wait, how did you get that opportunity?
Well, it came with my dad, who had known Tito Puente from the big band orchestra days, and it just kind of made sense. If you want to learn percussion, particularly Latin percussion, you start at the top. And
right.
This was the way to go.
Did you just stay at his apartment all summer long?
I was down the street. I was taking a taxi every day to almost every day. He was still working out on the road. There'd be breaks of 2 or 3 days, but that gave me an opportunity to kind of digest. Here was something that was so deep and so impressive. It really took it might take one's breath away to figure out how all this stuff really works. there's more to it than just beating on the sidewalk. There's finger techniques, there's tuning techniques, tension on the just tension on the bongo head. I mean, there's really worlds of entertaining learning to be had from diving deep into all sorts of percussion.
Yeah, it's almost as if you were interested in physics and your dad sent you to Albert Einstein or something, you know?
Yeah, well said.
It's pretty crazy that was where you started. And then when you got the guitar, from that moment on, did you have any other ambitions with your life?
No, I embraced that guitar. Once we cranked up that amplifier, I knew that loudness was the name of the game, and off we go. I haven't looked back since. I got to hand it to you.
Have you ever wanted to do something else?
Well, we've pretty much, fortunately, my two partners in ZZ Top, bass playing Dusty Hill, and our beardless drummer, Mr. Frank Beard, the three of us have always kept an open end to embarking on things that might not be anticipated or expected. The good news is that the three of us shared a kind of a common background. We're all the same age by 3 months. Unfortunately, I'm the junior executive here, but we learned from the radio, that being from Texas radio and even down the border blasters out of Mexico.
As you memorialized in your song, Heard It on the X.
Exactly. And that has brought us together, and it's also allowed us to expand into some and unexpected forays into things, both musically and on the backbeat side of things.
Do you remember back in 1966? Country Jesus, hillbilly blues, that's where I learned my lick. From coast to coast and line to line to every county there. I'm talking about that outlaw X is cutting through the air. Anywhere, y'all, everywhere, y'all. I heard it on the X.
Hey folks, we're having a great time making these daily episodes. You can help other folks discover the show by sharing your favorite episode on social media, giving us a review on Apple Podcasts, or just telling a friend. Thanks.
Well, I first met Frank Beard, our beardless drummer, which is really funny when you speak of ZZ Top and you say, "Oh yeah, those guys with the beards." Oh, but what about that other guy? No beard. There was another group that was working at the same time. The Moving Sidewalks came face to face with the Chessmen. The Chessmen featured Jimmy Vaughn on guitar and Doyle Bramhall on drums, Tommy Carter on bass, Billy Etheridge. They were a great outfit, and that's probably the thread from the early days of ZZ Top brought us into the present trio, the lineup of us three being Frank, Dusty, and yours truly. That's how it seems to have gelled, and as you pointed out earlier, the 12-bar blues band suddenly became interested in experimenting and expanding the different ways to make it. Now, I must say that percussion, from a drummer standpoint, has been really the backbone of the whole ZZ Top experience. I credit so many expressions from a thrash and bash point of view. That seems to be what propels what we like to do. You won't find us playing an acoustic set necessarily. it's more pedal to the metal. Let's keep it loud.
Let's talk about the Moving Sidewalks a little bit. You were contemporaries of Roky Erickson and the 13th Floor Elevators. How did your relationship with that music affect what you were doing in the Moving Sidewalks?
Yes, the experience with Roky Erickson and the 13th Floor Elevators took our little rhythm and blues band into the psychedelic area. The 13th Floor Elevators, elevators go up, and we said, well, Moving Sidewalks go forward. That is an extension of what we were assimilating from Roky and his gang. We were all living in this house called the Louisiana House down in the depths of psychedelia. But without question, their foray into the madness that was unexpected. Here's a bunch of guys from Texas that got run out of the state, wound up in San Francisco, but they had popularized the term psychedelia to the sounds that they were making. And with Rocky's voice leading the charge, it was undeniable. This was something to grab a hold of and see if you could make sense out of it.
I also read that you went to art school at one point in Hollywood. Is that right?
Yes. That was back in the late 60s. The Moving Sidewalks we were starting to make noise. We moved to California back in 1968, probably late 67, 68. Things were really picking up steam on the West Coast, and we took that artistic example at kind of a background to make a statement. Everybody was trying to make heads or tails of what was upending the planet at the time, and those were some great days. The Summer of Love, right on Sunset Boulevard.
Your uncle Cedric Gibbons was the most acclaimed production designer in the history of Hollywood. Was he a creative influence on you?
Yes, Cedric Gibbons, who held down the fort at MGM. Very interesting background. If you were to review the number of films that carry that name, Cedric Gibbons as art director, one would be quite astounded. The output from MGM was spectacular, and without question, he might be considered one of the premier art directors of the time. What's interesting is his finesse toward detail, which is reflected in the house that is just up the street here in Los Angeles. I think on occasion, the present day owners might allow a quick glimpse into this kind of Art Deco expression from the 30s that exemplifies just the great design talents that carry through so many pictures. It's really interesting stuff.
Were you focusing on a particular medium in art school?
Watercolor was the most challenging. You can get chalk, you can get crayon, you can get oil. Watercolor seemed to be the most defiant. And to this day, as I'll try dabbling in it on occasion. It's still the most interesting, in my opinion, one of the more interesting endeavors, from an artistic standpoint. Our friend, the late Bill Narum, who created the ZZ Top album covers from the very first album in 1971, ZZ Top's first album, all the way through the end of his career. He passed away with one interesting caveat. We were hanging out and enjoying some Mexican food, and he leaned over and he said, "Did you ever get the watercolor thing?" And we both laughed, because watercolor is probably one of the most challenging mediums, in that a plain piece of paper covered with water defies how you really define where the brush goes. It's well, let's bring it back to making loud sounds. I've talked to Mr. Greg Morrow, another great percussionist, born and raised in Memphis, working out of Nashville as one of the drummer of the year for the last 5 years, and the soft-spoken measures of approaching the drum kit are they've sort of been left behind. We all learned how to play rock music, the overhanded slap, but then we're now entering a new phase of how to express ourselves with finesse, and it's kind of like watercolor. It's very delicate. It can be deliberate, but at the same time, one can kind of back off and say, well, what do I really want to say here? Very, very, very impressive point in time.
Do you ask yourself that question when you're writing songs?
Possibly so. Here we are in the midst of a global pandemic crisis, and I was speaking with a buddy of mine. He said, what are we going to do? I got to come home and I got to make some food, but I don't know how to cook. And I said, let's start with something simple. How about some soup? And he said, okay, got any idea? I said, well, you've given me the idea for a great, a man, a can, and a microwave.
Did you write a song called that?
We probably should. I'll be working on it later, because there's nowhere else to go except grab a pencil and paper and start writing it down.
Yeah, how do you write? Do you have a disciplined approach, or do you just kind of write whenever you feel like it?
I think that Keith Richards said it best. He one time, we were sitting down, and he was smiling, looking overhead, and I said, what's up? And he said, don't forget that creative river, of that stream of consciousness that's constantly moving by. He said, all we have to do is pick up the antennas and dive in. And that pretty much summed up what what this mysterious thing of songwriting is all about. There's a moment when you get this feeling. It's hard to describe, perhaps, but there's a moment when you know what you're writing down is energetic.
Been waiting for the bus so late. Have mercy. Been waiting for the bus so late. I got my brown paper bag and my take-home pay.
Do you find that sometimes that creative river is accessible, whereas other times you'll sit down to play and it's elusive?
Well, correct. The bonus is having a destination where you can enter the room, grab pencil and paper, and start scribbling down things that move you in one direction or another. It might be an experience that you had early in the day or days before. Compelled by meeting other writers, and collectively things seem to percolate when that backbeat starts going, and it could be a 4/4, it could be a shuffle, it could be E obtuse 5/4. Let's get after it. That's when things really start to grind. And I would say that our writing experience is propelled by the mystery of the unexpected. Most times things begin to unfold in quick time, and sometimes maybe it doesn't take 5 minutes. All of a sudden you've got something that you think is of value. You got to drop the bucket in the well and see what.
I've heard bands described as similar to a polygamous marriage. Instead of worrying about just one person, you're worrying about two people in your case. And, it's hard enough to keep a marriage to one person together for a lifetime, but you've seemingly kept it together for longer than most people.
Well, we enjoy getting to do what we still get to do. And one of the threads that has led us through 5 decades of enjoyment was trying to outguess who's going to make the first mistake. We call it going to the Bahamas. Going to the Bahamas is not a problem. It's getting back. How do you get back from the Bahamas? And each time we take the stage, it's with a wink and a nod, and let's go ahead. And in the midst of thrashing and that all of a sudden, where do we take it from here? But somehow we've managed to arrive back at a rather gleeful point of progression, and it's always straight ahead.
Sometime between the album Tejas and El Loco, you arrived in London and were taken with the punk scene that was happening over there.
Yeah, the scene in London was so inviting. It was kind of this magnetic thing, and I had the opportunity to let Frank go his way down to Jamaica. Dusty went down to Mexico. I hopped on a plane and wound up in the UK watching the punk scene rather in its infancy, starting to. It was like, who cares? what I liked about it was like total give a shit, and the announcement was understated. There was no announcement. It was just get it and get it again, and it was that, I guess that was that energy that propelled something triggered. There was some interesting brain game that made no sense at all.
Was there a conscious effort to switch up the aesthetic of the band for Eliminator and Afterburner?
Well, the turning point for the band seemed to gel right at the beginning of DeGuayo. We regained, I guess, a collective acceptance of the importance of timing and tuning. Timing and tuning. There's on the street. There's a magnetic appeal when things resonate with the heartbeat, which is timing, and then when things resonate through a tuning, everything winds up in line.
Was Frank, who's an incredible drummer, was he hurt when you started using drum machines?
Well, Frank Beard, our man with no beard, really embraced the implementation of drum machines to facilitate getting this fell in line with our new theory of timing and tuning, and it started with the Roland 808, later with the DMX. There were several things that were starting to show up. We had the good graces of living in Memphis, working at Ardent Recording Studio, and our fearless leader, John Fry, along with the late engineers John Hampton and Joe Hardy, and Terry Manning.
We had a fellow named Jody Stevens from Big Star who works at Ardent on this show a few years back.
Yes, that seemed to be the hotbed of new and investigative experimentation with all kinds of the newest and kind of, I guess you could call it crazy. But John Fry was intent on maintaining his global status of John Fry was intent on maintaining Ardent Recording Studios as being the global go-to recording studio. If you wanted it, it was there.
Tell me about what's going on in your life right now.
So right now, we're enjoying celebrating 5 decades with ZZ Top. I'm still grinding it out on the Gibson 6-string, the Fender 6-string. Dusty has been so stalwart with his big badass low end, and of course Frank is always experimenting. He's a standby with Tama drums. He's also looking hard with the new HD percussion, and as well as a DW. So there's all kinds of things. What seems to propel the sound? First comes the backbone, which is the backbeat, and then the low end, And then Ted Kornblum with Magnatone amplifiers has provided our back line. And the new Magnatone line of amplifiers is absolutely stunning. They come from the low to the high and all points in between. It's really a gas to get back on the deck and let us go for it as we do.
How will you stay creative during this time of social distancing?
Well, we're going to stand by and play it safe like everyone else. Social distancing is a far cry from what we have grown up with. And at the same time, I think it's safe to say that we're going to play it by the books. Let's follow the recommendations of those that are in gear and at the front line, making us all safe. Stay at home when you can. Stay at home when you can't.
Is there any new music that's exciting to you right now?
I've gone, of course, we fall back on everything recorded by Jimmy Reed. And then there's this long list of blues guys, Howlin' Wolf, Muddy Waters, Albert King, B.B. King, Freddie King, so much of that stuff. Even getting into reggae, the extremes of the DJ toasting of U-Roy and I-Roy. There's so much to learn, and hopefully some of these doldrum moments will bring us into kind of the light bulb might go off and start some new trend that will be infectious in a way that's different than the other infections.
Is there anything that you've always wanted to try that you haven't tried creatively? Creatively
speaking, I think that getting back to what we do is based on the backbeat. I'm so happy to continue working with so many great drummers. First and foremost, Mr. Frank Beard, the man with no beard, Mr. Greg Morrow, Mr. Matt Sorum, Joe Fazio. I mean, there's great sounds to be discovered, and I think that right now we have the opportunity to push the envelope and expand the sound expression across the board.
Do you still experience the same type of joy that you experienced when you were a kid and you got the Fender Champ and the Gibson guitar under the tree?
Yes, the continual surprise is listening to Jimmy Reed and those great recordings from VJ during the 50s that seem to continually resonate and mystify. It's the interplay between Eddie Taylor, Jimmy Reed, and the many backing players, Vernell Fourier on drums, could be Clifton James on drums. The magic is still there. It comes back to one word: simplicity.
Billy Gibbons, thank you so much for being on the show.
Appreciate that. I look forward to catching up with you and all the followers of the Big Bad Crashing Backbeat. Let's go for it.
Thank you.
Have mercy.
The Trap Set is produced by me, Joe Wong, along with Chris Karwowski, who also edits the program. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Trap Set, and visit our website, thetrapset.net, to subscribe to our show for free. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please donate to our show. If you can't afford to donate, please tell a friend and give us a good rating on iTunes. Send your feedback and guest requests to thetrapset@gmail.com.